Hello everyone, Toon World here. Hopefully you are all having a wonderful day whenever it is you are watching this video. Today, we're going to be tackling my take on Gold Pride P.U.N.K post Photon Hypernova. Now, I must be honest, I do think this is my preferred variant of P.U.N.K moving forward. It isn't because I don't like the Therion P.U.N.K variant and or the Therion Springens variants. However, I do think the playstyle of this deck is more fitting for myself, someone who prefers those more mid-range style builds and mid-range style decks that grind out your opponent through accruing a ton of resources, as opposed to just amassing a giant board that just negates everything that your opponent does. That said, I am working on a Therion P.U.N.K list, so if you are interested in seeing that, please let me know in the comments below. Additionally, if you have any feedback for the video, for example any deck choices or something more meta like the way in which the video is formatted, also let me know down below. I always appreciate seeing any comments like that, as it helps me improve my videos for all of you viewers to enjoy. This all out of the way, remember to like and subscribe, it does help the channel grow, and with that, I will get on with the video. Okay, so here we have the main deck monsters. You can see that I am doing this deck profile a little bit differently from my previous deck profiles, in that rather than laying out each individual card and or sets of cards, I've just elected to show all of the cards for a given section of the video so that we can focus on the commentary itself. So I'm going to go through each of these groupings. We're going to talk about the P.U.N.K cards first, and in regards to the P.U.N.K cards, you will see that the 3 Xayman, 3 Ogre Dance, 3 Foxy Tune is still consistent with previous peer builds and or previous P.U.N.K builds that emphasize P.U.N.K more so than the other archetype. Basically, all these cards, or all 3 of these cards, tutor out each other and or search each other and or the rest of the archetype. So I would not play any less than 3 of those names. For the Deer Note, I am only playing 2. In the past I have played 3, and my reasoning for that was the fact that it gave you more grind game, since this is very essential for some of your combos, and it allowed you to draw the Deer Note in the case that your Foxy Tune gets hit by a hand trap. However, right now I think you can get away with 2, at least in this build where your Gold Pride cards are extenders, so that's why I've cut it down to 2 for now. The 1 Madam Spider, 1 Wagon, these are relatively self-explanatory in that you only need 1 searcher per spells and traps, because we only play 1 copy of the field spell right now and 1 copy of the trap card, so any extra copies would be overkill. The 1 Share Kusai is a point of contention. Realistically, you only need 1 since we're only playing 1 Rising Carp. However, there are some games that I've encountered where I did want more level 3 names to summon off of Foxy Tune on, say, follow-up turns where I'm trying to go for game and or something similar, just because Xayman of course can't search itself, so sometimes you might want to say normal summon Xayman, search level 3, and then be able to make a rank 3 or something off of it. You can search Ogre Dance, but sometimes that's not available, so the 2 copies do come up, but I think 1 is fine for now. For the Gold Pride cards, so the ratios right now vary a lot versus other deck lists. Right now I'm playing 3 Captain Carry, 2 Nitro Head, 1 Leon. 3 Captain Carry is fairly standard just because it is the best Gold Pride right now in terms of this combination, being a non-tuner that can synchro summon with the level 3 Psychic tuners that P.U.N.K are to make Star Leon. Furthermore, it is the Trap Searcher, so in order to access that high powered trap card, I would maximize on Captain Carry as a result. The 2 Nitro Head, 1 Leon. So Nitro Head, I don't feel like this particular build I have here needs 3. Some of your Gold Pride P.U.N.K list might need 3, but in my case, I'm not playing many rank 8s. I only have the Dingrisu, and I am confident enough in the P.U.N.K engine itself to make, say, Amazing Dragon and or Psychic and Punisher without needing that extra level 8 extender. You could argue that this card should be at a 3 of just because Kashtira, which could be at the top of the format right now, it does sort of neuter them in that the token it summons to their field does turn off their free special summons, but I feel like this deck is strong enough against Kashtira with the side deck included to the point where 2 is a decent enough ratio to get away with. The 1 Leon is definitely an interesting choice. I have seen a lot of people playing 2 or 3, but the reason why I'm only playing 1 is because I don't think it's that great of a card. The Summon from Grave effect does lock you into gold price, and we're only playing Star Leon in this list, so you can't really benefit off of that too often. Also, since it isn't a non-tuner, you can't make Star Leon with it, so for the most part, it just ends up being an extender. And I think the P.U.N.K engine, as well as the other Gold Pride cards we have, work well enough to where you don't always need multiple Leons as an additional extender. So I'm only playing 1 as a result. I do think I could bump this up to 2 or 3, given some of the grievances I have with the spells and traps that I will talk about later. But for now, this has worked fine. Finally, the hand traps. 1 Ogre, we're just playing the 1 copy because it is searchable off of Dragon Drive in the case that you potentially already have the P.U.N.K name. You would need to search off of it in hand, and it's, you know, fairly decent in the current format. You hit some of the field spells of rogue decks. You also hit Kashtira Rebirth, or whatever the continuous spell is, which is a pretty strong hit, so it's nice to have. The 3 Ash Blossom, I do think this is pretty strong this format, given that, again, I'm speaking as if Kashtira and Branded are the best decks. I'm not sure if they are, because this is pre-recorded to YCS Las Vegas, but overall it seems pretty strong in that you hit the Kashtira E-Tally, you hit all the Kashtira names, you hit Branded Fusion, you hit a lot of the branded cards, you also hit Sprite, Blunder, Tier to an extent, and all of the rogue decks that are below all of those other decks, so no reason not to play this card, I think, in the current format. The 3 Nibiru is interesting. Again, going off that logic that I had of Kashtira and Branded probably being the best decks, they don't always play into Nibiru, or they can probably play around it in some situations. I guess Kashtira less so than Branded. Nonetheless, I do think this is a strong enough card since it does pressure your opponent into having to respect it. Otherwise, of course, you drop this on them. So it's a nice inclusion. And of course, going with that argument of rogue decks being more prevalent given that the Gatekeeper tier is gone, this does hit a lot of rogue decks pretty well on top of that. So this is the Magnetic Monsters, and we're going to get on with the spells and traps. Alright, so here we have the spells and traps. The 3 Emergency Teleport is very straightforward in this deck. Basically, it is one of your best extenders and or starters, since all of your level 3 P.U.N.Ks are psychics. Not much else to be said there. The 1 Extreme Session is potentially interesting to some of you. In the past, I have played 2 or 3 copies just because I felt like it was such a strong card that you want to make sure you could see it. For example, let's say your Wagon gets interrupted somehow. Having an additional copy in hand means that you are guaranteed to draw off of it and do what P.U.N.K does best. However, I encountered that you didn't always need those additional copies, in that Wagon wouldn't get interrupted, and or you would sometimes draw that or multiple copies of this off of the initial copy you activate. So it would end up being a dead card in hand versus, say, if that Extreme Session additional copy was a hand trap or something else. So as a result, I chose to cut it down to 1 and keep it at 1 for now. I might bump it up back to 2, but we'll have to see as the format grows. The 3 Crossout is the set of slots that I think is the most volatile, in that you could change it. Throughout testing, it was okay. Like, whenever you could hit a Nibiru and Ash Imperm Ghost Ogre, it was nice, but there were a lot of situations where I would just have it in hand and it be dead, or I would draw into it after I would have needed it, and then it was still dead. So I think replacing this with a more proactive card, for example, either more hand traps, maybe Small World to search the Gold Pride cards out, more Gold Pride names, whatever it be, is potentially a better use of your deck space. So I might consider changing this in the future. I just have it in this particular deck profile since this is the list I had tested the most with, and I didn't want to rush out a modified version of it that I wasn't confident in. The trap cards here, 3 Imperm, great hand trap right now for effect negation, also for going second, as it helps disrupt, or it helps get rid of your opponent's disruptions in the case they have one. The 2 start your engines. I do think 2 is the correct ratio, just because you have the initial copy to search off carry, and then the second copy to search off of subsequent carries. Even if you draw multiple copies of these, you can remember these aren't a hard once per turn card, so having 2 isn't even bad to see. Finally, the 1 Nashiwari Surprise. I know a lot of people are playing Gabu or playing Gabu and this card. However, I felt like only 1 trap was really necessary because you don't always see it in hand and so are usually able to trigger Spider. Furthermore, I felt like the Raigeki break, even though it can be awkward in certain situations, overall, just being able to pop a card on field for free felt strong enough. So I'm just a fan of it. I might change to Gabu in the future if I do deem this not strong enough and or too awkward in the current format. You know, the format's still developing, so we still have time to see what happens. But for now, my historical knowledge of Punk has this card in. This is the spell's traps, and now we're going to move on to the extra deck. At last, we have the extra deck. So the extra deck, it can be very variable. The choices you see here are just what I felt would best serve my needs when playing the deck. There are some certain axioms here. You have Rising Carp, 2 Dragon Drive, 2 Amazing Dragon, 1 Psychic and Punisher. These are staples in pure Punk lists, and given that really Gold Pride Punk is more so just an extension of pure Punk, I would see no reason to play any less copies of what you see here. Rising Carp is necessary for your combo. Psychic and Punisher is a great boss monster that can sometimes win you games. The 2 Dragon Drive helps you in that the first one is great for going first. Second copy helps you extend going second. The 2 Amazing Dragon, I promise you I've gone through both copies almost every match I've played, just because you do use it for the quick synchro effect during your opponent's turn, and then you need a second copy on subsequent turns to amass your board. So those are staples there, and I won't get into further detail on that unless you want to, in which case let me know in the comments below. The 1 Dragite, this is my choice of alternative level 8 synchros. I do think it is nice since it catches a lot of people off guard. People don't realize that Rising Carp is a water, and they have forgotten about this card relative to Adamantipator format. So you can bring this out, lock a spell and trap they might have set, and then do your plays from there. So really solid card overall. The remainder of the synchros we're playing, Star Leon and Coral Dragon, these are for the sake of the Gold Pride cards. Star Leon is very self-explanatory, great pop, also gains attack, and then the shuffle effect can be awkward, but fortunately Leon can summon back carry from grave to make this again. So really nice card. Hopefully this archetype gets more support. Coral Dragon, I was initially playing 2 copies of Star Leon, but there were a lot of cases where I didn't feel like I needed the second Star Leon, so I quickly replaced the Star Leon with the Coral Dragon because I felt like the additional removal it offered, as well as the fact that it does draw a card when sent to grave, would come up. Of course, in testing, I haven't used it quite yet, but only further games will tell me for sure if I want to keep it in here or if I will cut it. The XYZ monsters, Dingirsu, Phantom Knight Breaksword. So Dingirsu, I think, is the best rank 8 option for a deck like this. Being able to just, non-targeted send something to grave also offers protection. It's very easy to make with not only your built-in Punk engine, but also with the inclusion of Nitro Head. So I really like this card and feel like it is a staple almost for this particular variant. The Phantom Knights of Breaksword, I wanted a rank 3 option, for example in the case you drew the one of Leon, and or if you just needed to have an option outside of level 6 synchros, since sometimes you would have, for example, 2 Punk tuners on field and you can't make anything out of that. That is where the rank 3 comes in, and really this card has served me quite well, so great for removal, would keep it in for now. Finally, we have our list of Link monsters. The Dark Unicorn Access Code Talker, this is sort of a Link climb engine. Dark, it is sometimes hard to make, but when it does come up, it is fairly strong since there are still a lot of decks that rely on dark monsters in the format. Unicorn is just a great generic way to get rid of cards on your opponent's field. Access Code Talker is Access Code Talker. To address the elephant in the room, Underworld Goddess, I am just playing this right now because it's the start of the format. We don't really know what's going to be the best deck and or what are going to be the best decks with an S at the end. So in the case that people are playing certain tower decks, maybe you play into the mirror where you can't out the opponent's end punish for some reason, it is a nice card that can catch your opponent off guard. I guess my logic could be flawed there, but honestly this card has served me well enough for me to keep it in spite of some flaws and or opposing thoughts that might go against its inclusion. This is the extra deck. We're going to quickly talk about the side deck and then go to the concluding remarks. So the side deck is really a work in progress. Some of these choices I do feel strong about, but then some of them I do want to change. Namely, Droll and D-Barrier. They're good, but I don't feel like they're the greatest in the current format. For example, Droll doesn't hit as many decks as I thought it would, and Dimensional Barrier is good against Branded and into Branded and into Tier, but I think there are better options for those two decks as opposed to this particular card. Who knows though? These 9 spells I do feel like are fairly strong in the current format. Back removal is always nice, and then the Book of Eclipse being an option to shut off an Arise Heart, shut off your opponent's non-link board full of a ton of negates. It's honestly a really nice choice in the current format. I might end up maining it even over the crossout though. I've said a lot of things about the crossout slots. I do think I will change them in the future. So this is I'm just showing this to all of you so that you have an idea of what you could side in this deck, though this is definitely far from perfect, so take it with a grain of salt. Now that we've talked about the side deck though, let's finally get on with the concluding remark. The main thing I want to drive home with this concluding remarks section is the fact that this deck is a solid option going into the current format. It isn't going to be the best deck, nor is it going to be the second or third best deck, at least I perceive it not to be so. Nonetheless, it does have quite a few tools available to it that do give it an edge, not only versus other options you might consider playing as a low tier or rogue option, but also into matchups with the top contenders. Time will tell where this deck goes. We, of course, are only at the start of the format. There could be innovations that push this deck forward. Furthermore, Gold Pride will be getting new support in the future, and that could vastly shake up how this deck is played and or its power level relative to other contenders. So we'll just have to see where it goes. You know, I'm very optimistic. I do like the playstyle of the deck a lot, as I said earlier. Theory on Punk is still good, though for now, this deck variant has a special place in my heart. This was my take on Gold Pride P.U.N.K. Hopefully all of you viewers enjoyed it. I do appreciate you having stayed through this video for so long, and I hope you got something out of what I talked about here today. Again, if you did, and or if you had feedback for me, please let me know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. It does help the channel grow. We are on a sort of spree right now, and the more the merrier. Otherwise, let me cue the outro.